In this video, we will learn about how to update data objects in your application database. For this purpose, we will be using a model for users. And in users model, we've got various fields, including the first name, last name of the user, email, and some demographic information and some date time information. There are 4 nodes, specific service nodes that you can use to update data in your application database. Let's start with the first 2 of them. For this purpose, we need to create an endpoint called update user data. This will be a put request. Typically, updates to object resources in REST API is used by using the put method. So it will be users, and we will be having also a user ID. This user identifier will be used to identify the user that we will be updating in the database. And we will be creating a new service for this purpose, update user data. Okay, let's create the endpoint. Let's get into our service. So, what we will be doing is that we will be using one of these update nodes. Okay, we will be updating the user identified by the unique identifier. So we will be using update single object by ID node. Okay. And the fields that we will be updating, the user fields that we will be updating, will be passed in the request body. So we will be getting a user object, a single user object. The first thing that we need to do is getting the body of the request, because the request can contain some other information. So let's getting the body, and we will be passing this update information, the fields and their values, to be updated to the update single object by ID, and saying that okay, we will be updating users, and the ID of the user object that we will be updating is coming from the params, which is under the IDs, the path parameters, user ID. So user that is matching to this user ID, get the values and update those values in the database. And finally, we will be having a response node which will be returning back the updated user. Okay, so quite simple. So let's test this new endpoint. I already deployed my application to a development environment, so let's launch the test panel. Okay, so I also created some convenience services like the get user service, which basically retrieves the 10 users from the database. So let's assume that we will be updating information for Sarah Adams, and the Sarah is identified by this ID. Okay, so this is our new endpoint that we created. Let's pin this one. The ID will be here. Okay, and we will be updating some of the properties in here. So let's start with updating the join date. I'm just interested in updating the join date. So, okay, which is basically AutoGIS automatically put here the current date and time. Let's see what happens when I try to update the join date. Okay, so AutoGIS raised an error and saying that after all validations, the input object for user becomes empty and does not have any valid field value pairs and so on. The thing is the following actually. If you go to our data model, okay, join date, this is a read-only field. Okay, the read-only field can only be updated during the creation time. We cannot update, we cannot set the values of the read-only fields during update time. Okay, when we first created, we set that value, and it doesn't change. That's why AutoGIS ignores the join date. And since it ignores the join date, there is nothing to update basically, right? That's why it's raising an error message. There is nothing to update. I cannot update anything. What happens if I change this thing? I'm just making a change in the data model structure. I'm making it read-only. I'm not making it. I'm just unchecking the read-only part. Let's see what happens if I try to update this thing. This time it worked. It updated the join date. Okay. Let me put it back to join date as read-only again. Okay. Let me try again. It's provided an error message. Okay, so let's try the other fields that we can update. Obviously, we will not be updating this thing. Maybe we can update the image URL and also the city information. Okay, let's assume that she's living in Chicago. Reminder sent is false. In the image URL, maybe we can copy one of the image URLs in here. This one maybe. Okay. And put it here. Okay. Originally, she doesn't have any city information. She doesn't have any image URL information. And the reminder sent was false. Let's put the reminder false to true. Let's run this thing. This is updated. Let me fetch the records again. Yep. Reminder sent true. We've got the image information. We also have the city information right now. Okay, let's also update the city information for Mike, Mary, and John. Okay, so let's go back here. The ID is this one. The city information is this. Okay. We updated that one. What's the next one? This is the next one. Let's update that one also. Assuming that these are like the Adams family, right? They are living in the same city. And the next one is this one. Okay, so let's get the records again. Okay, this is Chicago, this is Chicago, this is Chicago, and this is Chicago. Cool. So with this simple update node, update single object by ID, we can update the fields of objects that are identified by an ID. There is another node, okay, called update objects by update multi-objects by query. Let's see what this node does. Okay, I will create another endpoint for this one. Update multiple objects. Put request. It will be again users. I don't need to put an ID here because I will be updating multiple objects in one batch. So let's put the update multiple objects. Okay. Let's create this one. Let's get into the service definition. Again, similarly, we will be getting a input body for the fields that we will be updating. This is a single object we will be getting. And what we will be doing is similar to the other service. We will be getting the body. Okay. And then we will be using this update multi-objects by query. Okay, so what this node does. Basically, this node runs a filter query, select query, for the items that are matching to that query, then updates the fields according to the input data provided. Let me show you how. So we will be updating the users, okay? And let's assume that we will be updating the let's say the people with the last name Adams, okay? So our query will be not last login but last name is equal to Adams, okay? And after the update, okay, after the update, we will be returning the success response. This node will not provide the updated records, updated objects, but a summary information about how many objects updated in the database. So it will be returning back update info. Okay, let's go back to our test panel. The new endpoint is here. Let me pin this thing. Let's assume that the Adams family has moved from Chicago to Los Angeles. Okay. Let's run this thing. Okay, so it updated 4 records in the database. Total match 4, updated 4. How? Let's get refresh. Okay, as you see, Sarah Adams, Los Angeles, Mike Adams, Los Angeles, Mary Adams, Los Angeles, and John Adams, Los Angeles. Okay, this is how you can update multiple objects using the filter query. But be careful about how you are specifying this query, because accidentally you might be updated more records or the records that you don't want to update. So be careful about what kind of select query, select filter that you are applying. Okay. Okay, we've got 2 more nodes that we can use to update our objects in the database. So those are update object fields by ID, and update object fields by query. They work very similar to the other versions that we reviewed just a few minutes ago, but let's create some additional endpoints to test how those nodes work. So let's do something like this: update object, update user object. Okay, this will be again a put method. I will be using the users version 2. Okay, user ID. I will be getting a specific user ID and updating that user. Update users object version 2. Okay, let's create that one. So in this case we will be using this update object fields by ID node. We will not be sending any request body data. We will not be getting a user object in the body of the request. What we will be doing is the following actually. I will be dragging and dropping this output as input to this update node. Okay. First, the thing is we will be updating the user's data. The object ID will be coming from the path parameter user ID. And what we can do is, different than the previous versions of this update node, instead of getting this update fields as an input, as an input to this node, we can manually add the fields that we would like to update. For example, for that ID, let's assume that we will be changing the city parameter, okay, and we will be assigning a new parameter, a city, let's say London. Okay. Of course, you can write any expression using the input parameters that you pass to this node, but right now I just put a fixed value London here. Similarly, we can return back the updated object as the response. Okay. So let's just test this endpoint, new endpoint, update user object version 2. Okay. Let's get some users. This is the ID that we'll be using. We will be again updating Sarah. So let's put here. Okay. Let's see what happens. Okay. So we get the city updated to London. Originally the city was Los Angeles. If I refresh this thing again, as you see, the city became London. So this node is basically, instead of getting the data in the request body, you can manually select the fields you would like to update and put an expression for those updates. Okay, what else do we have? We've got the last update node, which is similar to this new version, but instead of a single object identified by ID, it updates the fields by the filter query, right? So let's add another node here. Okay, update multiple objects version 2. Sorry, this is not endpoint. I need to write here update multiple objects version 2. This will be again put, and this will be users version 2, and the new service will be update multiple version 2. Okay, let's get into the service of this one. So again, we will not be getting anything from the request body. What we will be doing is we will be using these update object fields by query. Okay, we will be getting this one. Similar to what we have done in the previous examples, we will be getting the users with the last name equal to Adams. Okay, and we will be again updating the city fields. Where's the city? Okay, yeah, here. And as the, let's put it Paris this time. Okay, so this will be selecting the fields that match this query and update their city field value to Paris. And finally, we can also, of course, return response as the number of items that are, the number of objects that are updated. Okay, let's go back for testing this one. I'm putting it here. Let's run this thing. Okay, as you see, we've got 4 matches and 4 updated. And originally this was London, Los Angeles, Los Angeles. They should all be Paris right now. Paris, 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 Paris. Yep. Okay, that's it for data update in AutoGIC. In summary, we've got 4 different nodes that you can use to update data in AutoGIC. The first 2 of them are basically getting the update values as input. These nodes are the update multi-objects by query and update single object by ID. The other 2 versions are they don't get the inputs as input to the node, but you specifically select the fields that you would like to update, and those nodes are update object fields by ID and update object fields by query. Hope that helps. Thanks a lot for watching.